So the grain, what is the grain? To know that, we need to understand what we are talking about. We are talking about the fabric. So the muslin fabric, if you have seen the fabric muslin, it is a plain woven made from cotton, and sometimes it is bleached, sometimes it is unbleached also. And then we have three different kind of fabric. One is coarse weave, which is used for draping and test fit. Then there is a lightweight, which is very lighter weight, really lightweight, very thin. And then there is a heavyweight, which is used for structured garments. So here is a small, a little photo of the muslin fabric and the edge. So the selvage, I think everybody understands now. The edge which you see on the both sides of the fabric is the selvage, and they are like the boundaries of the fabric, and the fabric runs in between. So this illustration, if you see, you have to understand that this is a photo of a fabric, and these two are the selvage, the end points of the fabric. So here in in a fabric, you would see a selvage both the sides, and then the width is fixed, and the length can just go on and on depending on the weave. So width is fixed, it is between one selvage to another one. Now, seeing the grain is in the direction in which the yarn is woven or knitted. In terms of woven, we say it is a grain. So the fabric is woven like this vertically. First, the warp is put, and then the weft is put horizontally. We are going to see some video now to understand what is a grain. So understanding the fabric is very important to understand the grains. So the warp, which is the one yarn which is vertically here, we need to see, is put first, and then another yarn which goes in between the warp is called the weft. That's how the fabric is made, and wherever it is taking a turn or ending, those are the thicker edges or selvage. Another illustration that this is how the fabric looks like, a plain weave. So the warp is vertical, weft is horizontal. For our understanding, we are going to keep it like that. And so you can see that warp is cut over here. That means you can have a length of warp, and weft is taking a turn. That means the weft is defined in the boundaries. That means, what does this mean? That the fabric has a direction. You cannot use the fabric anyhow. Warp is a different aspect, weft is a different aspect. So the fabric has a direction. The first learning of about the grain. If you see the fabric closely, this is the cross section of the fabric which we saw just now. The fabric being woven, a plain weave. So if you can understand, seeing the photo, these are warps. So yeah, these all are warp which has been stretched and put into the loom. And then there is a weft yarn which goes along the warp, up and down, up and down. So here this gives us an understanding that warp has already been stretched. It cannot stretch further. While weft, because it is going up and down that warp yarn, it travels a distance. And here, as you can see, It is not a straight line. Weft is not a straight line, while warp is a straight line. So the weft can stretch more. A little easier illustration. So this is warp and this is weft. And then it keeps going on and on and on to create the fabric. So now the question is, for example, if the width of the fabric is 40 inches, how much is going to be the length of the weft yarn? Is it going to be 40 or more? So here in the real aspect, for example, if the width of the fabric is 40, length of the weft yarn is going to be 40 inches or more. So because we saw here the weft travels more, that means weft is more than the width of the fabric. That means the weft can stretch because there is more yarn in this much width. So if it is 40 inches, probably few millimeters, even though it is negligible, even though it is very, very less compared to the fabric width, still there is little scope that this curvature can go slightly straightened. So if you pull this both the side, there are chances that it can be pulled and the graph, the curve can go little flatter. So that means the weft can stretch and the warp cannot stretch compared to the weft. Why? Because the warp is put first in the loom and it is already been stretched, and especially weights are put so that the warp stays straight. So when the warp is straight, cannot stretch, weft is curvy, can stretch, that gives us an idea in which direction the fabric will have more stretchability. Means the fabric can stretch horizontally slightly, vertically not at all. So here you can see little another photo again. If this is the width, the weft is going up and down and covering more length in the 40. Another photo so that you get better idea. The warp is cannot stretch, weft can actually stretch. So now coming back to the grain, so if this is the fabric, this is the vertical lines are warp. If there are horizontal lines, there are weft. So a pattern, this I think if you can understand, this is a pattern of the front of the woman's top. So if the pattern is put like this, where the front or the vertical lines, the vertical aspect of the pattern is matching the warp. So we know now that these vertical lines are warp. If it is in line with warp, then this is one kind of grain. Then the second is if you put it on an angle, like a 45-degree angle, if the the front line, the center line of the body goes 45-degree angle, this creates another kind of a grain. And then if you put it horizontal, and then this is another kind of a grain, because if you see here, the warp is going on the body horizontally now. So these three grains we usually use in day-to-day pattern making. Now, you cannot put any pattern in any possible direction just because you have that small piece of fabric that you can just adjust it. No, that does not work out. There are these three main grain lines. We will see a little more in detail that these are used particularly for a particular part of the garment because of the direction it has, because this is warp which does not stretch, weft which stretches slightly, it will create a different effect on all these three different patterns. So again, seeing in terms of a top, which makes it easy for you to understand that one like this, one horizontal grain, one 45-degree. Now here comes the gravity or the ground in play. So this first one is called a straight grain. Straight grain means when the warp is running vertically on the garment. Second is cross grain, when the warp is running horizontally on the garment. Third is bias grain, when the warp is running on an angle, which is, if it is 45-degree angle, then it's called a true bias. If it is little lesser or more than 45, it is not a true bias. So we prefer a true bias, which is 45-degree angle. Now, all these three are related to the ground or gravity. Why? Because when somebody is going to wear this garment, that's when it comes in the place. The gravity is what creates a role in terms of using the grain properly, and then there are other aspects of the body. So when somebody is wearing a garment, they are for sure on the ground. That means gravity has a role to play in the garments which they are wearing. And second, their body has a role to play in the garment which they are wearing. So two aspects. The first one is understanding the gravity. Why? Because the gravity pulls things down. So here, if you see this one, the warp will have the gravitational pull. But if you see, the warp cannot stretch. So it will not stretch down. The cross grain, the gravity has slight effect on the weft, because weft is vertical over here. Now, if the garment is very short, the gravity will not play a role, only the body will play a role in fitting. But if the garment is really long, then the gravitational force will have an impact on the weft grain, and it will modify the fall. And then the third one here, the gravitational pull is in an angle over here. So this we will see in separate slide. Now, so here stretchability we already saw. In the first one, always remember there is a ground down. With respect to that, you are seeing the grain. The fabric is hanging vertically, horizontally on an angle on the body. So stretchability, this first scenario, the horizontal stretchability, uh, the horizontal stretchability is little bit, because it's the weft grain. Vertically the fabric cannot stretch because warp cannot stretch. Here in the second one, horizontal, the fabric cannot stretch because it's the warp direction. Vertical, it can stretch slightly. And on the third one, bias, which is on an angle, it can stretch horizontally as well as vertically. So these three are three different aspects of using the fabric.